I have been working on the planning for this front porch for a couple months now, and I am still stuck with deciding on paint colors for the ceiling, the floors, and this storm door. So what I'm gonna do is take a closer look at the brick on our house and see if I can pull some colors from that and just help me narrow it down. We started by giving our porch a good cleaning using our pressure washer and our shop vac. You always want a clean surface before painting. I'm using Sherwin-Williams Latitude exterior paint in a flat finish. This flat finish will help disguise any imperfections on the ceiling. Since I chose the color Moroccan Spice for the porch floor, I decided to go with the color Likeable Sand for the ceiling. Likeable Sand is a lighter color from the same swatch, so I sort of just assumed they would complement each other nicely. But as soon as I started edging in, I knew in my gut this wasn't the right color. It was too light and it just didn't feel like it complemented the brick very well. Regardless, I kept painting because I just wanted to give it a true chance and figured it would work well as a primer either way. At this point, I figured I should probably check and make sure I even like the color Moroccan Spice for the floor. So I tested it out and sure enough, I didn't. It was pulling too pink, so I went back to Sherwin-Williams, and the manager there made a great point that because our house is brick, it makes colors appear even warmer, which totally makes sense, and I never thought about that. But I'm definitely disappointed in myself for not getting samples to begin with. That's honestly very unlike me. So this time around, I grabbed a couple samples for the floor and kind of went back to the drawing board. After looking at my new samples, I decided to go with Sherwin-Williams Llama Wool for the floor. And once again, I figured using a lighter color from that same swatch would work well for the ceiling. So I chose Smoky Beige and got to work painting. At first, it seemed promising. It was more of a tan than a pink, and it was a little darker than the first color. But as much as it killed me to admit, I still wasn't a fan. So this is when I realized I needed to pivot. Initially, I didn't think I wanted a dark color for the ceiling because the original brown color was just too dark. But these colors felt way too light, so I wanted something in between that would just sort of blend in nicely. Eventually, I narrowed it down to Sherwin-Williams Superior Bronze, and thankfully, I love how this color looks. It just complements the brick so well. And I learned my lesson to always test samples before buying the paint. End of story. Our porch floor has accrued many layers of paint over the last 94 years, and it was starting to peel pretty bad. So our plan is to one day brick our porch floor, and when we do that, we'll have to completely strip all of the paint from the concrete, which is a process that we didn't really want to do twice. So for right now, we're just keeping it simple and giving our porch a fresh coat of paint. The goal is to get as much of the peeling paint off as possible. So we started by using our pressure washer, which worked well, but it just kind of made a big mess because paint chips were flying everywhere and water was puddling up on our porch, which we later found out was leaking down into our basement through some of the big cracks in our concrete. So then I just manually scraped with a putty knife for more hours than I'm willing to admit. I sort of fixate on tedious tasks like this and have a hard time knowing when to stop. So after days of literally chipping away at this, I kind of forced myself to come to a close. I slowly went around and double checked any of the peeling areas. I'd check around the edges and see if any of the paint was lifting. And if it was, I would kind of chip away at it a little bit more, and then I used my orbital sander with 80 grit paper and kind of feathered around the edges. And I also just sanded down the entire porch in general just for better paint adhesion. After this, I patched any cracks or gouges in the concrete with this ready mix concrete patch, which was really simple to use. You just apply it with a putty knife, and you can even use a dry craft brush to sort of blend it in. Finally, it was time to paint, so I edged in first with an angled brush and then used a roller on a pole for the rest. As I got more comfortable, I realized you'll get a smoother finish if you work in small sections at a time versus edging the entire porch at once, because being outside, the paint just dries pretty fast. I'm using Sherwin-Williams porch and floor enamel, which didn't require a primer of any sort, and it had really great reviews. I feel really hopeful that it's going to hold up well because one of my samples was this porch paint, and as you can see, it did not budge when I pressure washed. So here's how it's looking after the first coat. It's obvious where I patched, and I'm thinking I should have primed these areas. So I'm gonna actually go in now with this and do some spot priming. The thing is, this concrete patch product is meant to mimic the grainy texture of concrete, so when it's applied to a painted concrete surface like our porch, it does stand out. But for us, it wasn't a big deal. I knew this porch wasn't going to look perfect, and we're using a big outdoor rug on here anyway. So all in all, I ended up doing 3 coats of paint, but I probably could have gotten away with 2. Our storm door was the biggest eyesore on our front porch, so I was very excited to give this a little makeover. When we first moved in, I actually thought I wanted to get rid of the storm door entirely, but after living here for a bit, I realized how much I really appreciate it. It's extra insulation, extra security, and it allows so much more natural light in during the day, so for now, we're definitely keeping it. We removed the storm door from the hinges. You could paint the door while it's up, but removing it is not hard, and I just think it's easier to work with this way because you can prop it up on a couple of sawhorses. I started by giving it a good cleaning with Crud Cutter and a microfiber cloth, and then certain areas of buildup needed to be scraped off with a putty knife. Next, I taped off the glass and applied Sherwin-Williams Extreme Bond Primer. If you've never used this primer before, it's very durable and perfect for shiny surfaces like this. After that, I sanded it all down with a 220 grit sanding sponge, wiped up the dust with a tack cloth, and then applied the paint. I'm using Sherwin-Williams Trim Enamel paint. This stuff is so durable and levels very nicely. It's definitely pricier, but worth it. And Sherwin-Williams stores always have great sales, so I actually only buy paint there when it's 30 or 40% off. I considered using our paint sprayer, but honestly didn't feel like dealing with all the cleanup, and I know I can get a nice smooth finish by hand as well. So I used a brush for the edges and a small 1/4 inch nap roller for the rest. After I did my first coat, I went and painted the trim around the front door, so that will blend in nicely. All in all, I did 3 coats of paint on each side of the door and sanded with 220 grit sandpaper in between. This is an extra step, but it is so worth it for that beautiful professional looking finish. We also replaced the broken handle on our storm door, so now it just looks like a brand new door. We couldn't love it more, and the color, by the way, is Sherwin-Williams Black Fox. So I scored this cute wicker furniture set for really cheap on Facebook Marketplace. The love seat in particular isn't in the best shape, but it's still durable enough to use, and my plan was to give it a little makeover with, of course, more paint. But the more I looked at it on our porch, the more I really just appreciated the way it looked as is. So for now, I'm leaving them. Either way, this set definitely still needed some love. So first I repaired some of the areas that were unwoven. I would get them positioned properly and then put a dab of wood glue on it, and I would either clamp or use a small piece of painter's tape to hold it in place while the glue dried. After this, I cleaned the furniture using warm water and dish soap. I started by using this big attachment scrubber thing that I had, but then here I go again, getting too fixated on the small details. I went and got an old toothbrush and started working one piece at a time, and then I go and get some stray brad nails so I can scrape in all of the crevices. About an hour in, I had covered about 1 square inch and realized how ridiculous this was, because I cannot do this to the entire furniture set. That is crazy. So I did my best to get what I could without spending an eternity. Once it was dry, I tried this Howard Feed and Wax wood polish and conditioner. I had never heard of it, but it kept popping up in my research. So I applied it with a microfiber cloth and just sort of worked it into the wicker and then wiped off the excess with warm water. Right away, I noticed the difference. It just kind of gives the wicker life and vibrance. This sofa was just in desperate need of some moisture. I have never personally owned wicker furniture until now, but I'm learning that if you want it to last long, you have to take care of it and keep it clean and moisturized every so often. It makes sense. Another impactful change we made was swapping out our porch lights. I am a big lighting person, so this was worth the splurge for me to kind of set the right ambiance for our porch. I love how these lights look, and the beveled glass just kind of makes them look more upscale. And then I found some really nice warm light bulbs to put in them. I will link both of these below. We also wanted to add a little window flower box, and this was our first time drilling into our brick house, which was scary, but with a little force and a hammer drill, we got it done. I also wanted to share a little DIY fail with some planters that we already had on hand. I came across a little tutorial for using a mix of spray paints, including textured spray paints, which I had never used before. And at first I was really pleased with how it turned out, but after a couple days, the flakes kind of just started wiping off of the planter, which was a big bummer. And I knew I had to get after videos of our porch, so I gave our planter a really quick makeover with brown spray paint, which you'll see in the after videos. It's not my favorite look, so I'll eventually do another makeover on that planter, but regardless, I am so happy with how this porch makeover turned out, especially being budget friendly, so go check out the before and afters.